Imagine being 4 years old, a brand new country, a language you don't understand, and before you even find your footing, you lose your mum. 9 months after arriving in Australia, that little girl didn't just lose a parent, she lost her whole world twice. Today's guest carried that silence for nearly 7 years. She became a high achiever, then she built a business to help others find their authentic voice. And this is Evelyn, and this is Life in Biz Unfiltered. Welcome, Evelyn. We're so glad to have you here in the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for just holding space for us to share these stories.
Oh, we just love hearing those inspiring stories and having some beautiful humans here. And it's just wonderful to create those ripple effects for everyone watching. So, Evelyn, we're going back to little Evelyn. You were 4 when you arrived. What's your earliest memory of being here in Australia?
Wow, going back so many years. I mean, it's not that many years, let's be honest. I'm not that old. But yes, going back to that moment of like stepping into a new country. For me, the first moment that I can remember is actually stepping into the hostel, the accommodation that we had, right? So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is me being in a room, and it felt like a small room compared to what I had in El Salvador, which was, a two-story house. So for me, it felt like it was a small, dark room that I was in. And I remember being there with my siblings. So I've got an older sister who's 8 years older than I am, and an older brother who's 4 years older. So we were together there in that room. And I remember my parents having to leave to go somewhere. Like it was like an information night or something like that. I remember them talking about this important thing that they were going to, and then they left. And I remember like the door closing, and then all of a sudden I felt like I was in this room alone and confused as to what was happening. And again, I don't remember whether or not because my uncle came with us. So I assumed that maybe they left us with my uncle. But I guess for me, it was just the feeling of my parents leaving in this weird space where I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. They're going to some information night. Like, what is this all about? And I felt lost.
Wow, that must have been so scary for a 4 year old. I cannot even imagine.
Yes, and there's one more that I wanted to add actually is that I still sometimes get taken back to that moment. Sometimes there's this weird sense of like smell of toast. And it's not like every day when I smell toast, but it's just this random type of way that the toast smells. And that like sense of smell reminds me and takes me back to the hostel, a second memory that I have of going into like a breakfast room where all immigrants would sort of hang out for breakfast. And I'm assuming we used to eat toast there.
Wow. We're talking olfactory, right? Like when you smell something, it takes you back in time.
Yeah, yeah, it's really
You're
strange.
time
And
traveling, Evelyn. That
it
is
is.
crazy. And, growing up, you're surrounding yourself with these smells, these tastes, people, migrant families. When did the outside world start to feel different, like from the world at home?
Yeah, really good question. And again, going back to how this even came about for me as a memory, I didn't have this memory until I had daughters of my own, until the day that I dropped my daughter off at daycare. It almost brought me back to this memory of when you say outside world to outside of my home, it would be the next best thing was like them taking my parents, taking me to a daycare center again feeling lost, confused, and again alone. And then the memory that I have, and again comes back to music. And again, it didn't come at like it all sort of came about when I became a mum. When my for whatever reason, we were listening to Gypsy Kings. Do you know Gypsy Kings?
No.
Yeah.
Sounds very exciting though.
It's a Latino band. They're quite, famous, but obviously here they were playing it, right? And so again, that memory came. So me getting dropped off, going, where am I? What am I doing here? And then having two boys that were Salvadorian, so from El Salvador. And I remember the familiarity of at least having those two boys that I kind of could resonate with. And then the song came on, Gypsy Kings. And then that memory of like listening to that with my daughters as well, that all sort of combined in this sense of, oh my gosh, like that is the memory that I have from music and from having my own children.
Wow, we're talking time traveling through music. We're talking through smells and thirst. There's so much of, memories when we try to recall things through our senses, different senses that we have. And it's just wonderful that you could feel more connected by having those boys there. That's
Yes.
brilliant. Well, you also were talking about Spanish school from grade two all the way to year 12, and you were actually embarrassed by it. So, what does that embarrassment tell you about who you were trying to become?
Oh my gosh, going back to that, I remember that for me pushing back so much. And I just remember just wanting to fit in. Like I just wanted to belong. And when my dad made me go every Saturday, it was a hassle. Every Saturday I would be complaining about it and I'd repeat the things like, I don't need to speak Spanish. Like we're in Australia, no one speaks Spanish here. We're an English speaking country. And I felt some sort of embarrassment to tell my friends that, on a Saturday it wasn't, and again, it was like, not what my friends were doing. My friends were having fun on a Saturday, and I was having to go into Spanish school. So for me, it was just a bit of embarrassment that I wasn't like everyone else on a Saturday, that I had to do something different. And, looking back at that time, it was, yeah, just wanting to really be like everyone else. But now I must say, I'm so glad that my dad did make me go because,
Yeah.
like now, now I realize how important it is and I embrace it now. And, I always say that my girls will have a lot of choices in their life, but not like this. This will actually be a non-negotiable for them. Like they'll have to learn Spanish and they might say the same things to me. They may not, but I'm making sure they learn Spanish.
I think that's so important. And I feel like all kids believe that parents are doing something crazy. So my son started Hindi classes himself, and he just,
Oh, that's
he's like,
amazing.
Mom, why am I doing this? Nobody speaks this language in school. So, yeah, I hear you. I think it's so important for them at that point in time to fit in, to belong,
Yeah.
and then us giving them, those ropes to be more in tune with culture, with people, with community, so then they can actually belong as they grow up as well and feel
Yeah.
part of that culture. That's just
Well,
fantastic.
thank you for it.
Yes, yes. That's the plan. That's the plan, Evelyn. Well, we want to instill a bit of culture and learning new language. How amazing is that? Something different.
Exactly.
When you were just 5, Evelyn, you lost your mom to breast cancer,
Mm.
and that's 9 months after arriving here. So,
Wow.
how does a little girl process that kind of loss?
Yeah, very good question. And I think for me at that point, I felt like I just had to get on with it, like it was a feeling that I had of like we just have to move on. And that probably came from a decision that my dad made as well. Like, if you think about it at that point in time, he was in a new country, 9 months in, with a brother-in-law, another man, but two men and three kids. One was 12, the other one was 8, and the other one is 4. It's like, how do you process that, especially living in a masculine energy? It's like they don't know how to speak about it. They don't know how to open up. Like, I don't remember having any conversations about what had happened. And, to this day, I don't even remember, and even my sister as a 12-year-old it doesn't remember being told that she was even sick. There was like no communication between what was happening. and what was going to come. And all of a sudden she was there and then she wasn't. And for me, like processing all of that, I mean, I didn't have time to process it, right? It was just, you know, I was in prep, so I was going to school. So I remember even having like being in the funeral, and I remember also having my friends from like prep. There was a few friends there, and going back to school, it was like I just felt like I just had to get on with it. Like, no one there to talk to about it. And then, my dad moving on so quickly, um, there was no time to grieve.
That sounds extremely challenging, Evelyn. It's actually, coincidentally, it's, my mom's death anniversary, 13th death anniversary
Oh,
today.
sorry
And
to hear that. Always tough day.
yeah, and I
My
was
love to
just
you.
sharing with you whether that it still feel emotional, but I lost her, I mean, when I was quite adult,
Yeah.
and losing at such a young age. And I don't know how even come to close to imagining what that life would have been. So I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I can't even imagine what that looks like, It's I'm sorry for your loss. It's never easy. I think that losing a parent, regardless of what age, or regardless, and I sometimes think about that as well. It's like, I feel for those that lose their mum and they have such a beautiful relationship. It's like, how do you let go of all of those memories and the things that you did together? Whereas with me, it's almost like I lost something that I didn't even have anyway. It's like that's a
Mhm.
different type of loss. So that's a different
It
type
is
of,
a different type of loss, absolutely. And like you cannot compare, like, I mean, I can't understand what it would have been for you and
mm,
like, other way around because, yeah, like I literally made the way you explained the taste and stuff. So I made this Indian bread and I could smell it and it took me straight back to her making it. And I was just sharing that I'll make this dessert that she made and, just all
beautiful.
that. And, you recreate those to make you feel loved again and anchor
Yes.
it to that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And
It
it's
is.
beautiful to have those memories.
Yeah.
It's the Mother's Day energy coming out. We have Mother's Day just around the corner. And I was talking to mom early this morning myself. And I think I mean, I cannot imagine what the two of you have had, but I somehow believe because your grandma comes to mind, and we always carry a part of them along with us, and that's so beautiful, right? It's like it makes us more us and makes us special because they are with us, and we
Mm,
can sense their energy, and yeah, they're watching us from wherever they are, and hopefully cheering us along so that
yeah.
we can go ahead on this beautiful journey together.
Absolutely. They are always there. And I think that, yeah, when those moments happen and you realize how finite life is, it's like, you sort of see things differently as well.
Yeah.
And I think,
Mhm.
I learned that early on. And, and what I do bring with me is that although I had to I had to grow up really quickly, I had to grow up really fast. And one thing that I sort of took with me from that experience is always like, what can you learn from this? You can't control everything in life. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you actually react to it. So
Love that.
yeah, that in itself made me resilient and see things differently throughout my whole life, I guess.
Yeah, love that, Evelyn. And that's so important, right? When we realize that we have the power within us to control how we react to what has happened to us.
Hmm.
It defines our life and it shapes our life in a very different way.
It does.
For nearly 7 years, Evelyn, you couldn't speak about her. What did carrying that silence do to you?
Yeah, that's a really, I think, most life-changing thing for me to have to really unpack as an adult. During those 7 years, had to live with a false sense of identity, like
Mhm.
having to live this happy family, not telling anyone because my dad actually remarried only 9 months after my mum passed away. to another Salvadorian woman. And so it was a lot easier, obviously, to just replace that mum figure. She was Salvadorian. I could speak Spanish to her. And, when I would go to the cemetery, for example, with my family, it wasn't just false sense of identity. It was even the way that she mothered me. It was very dominant. And she didn't want me to talk about my mum. She would say things like, there's no point crying about her. It's not going to bring her back. The cost that I had from that was like my own voice, I guess, got like silenced. I couldn't speak about it. I couldn't grieve about it. And even though, because I was the youngest, when we would go as a family, she would take me away from my own family. And I remember she would take me away from this, like from her grave area and take me somewhere else and to start talking to me about other things. And I remember looking back going, my whole family's over there taking a moment to grieve. And she's just taking me away to dominate or manipulate the way that I felt about that situation, which I think I carried a lot of hurt from that.
Wow, that sounds so intense. And I think it's like not feeling heard.
Hmm.
It's just insane, right? Is that innate thing of like, love me and I want you to hear me. And
Yeah.
it's like,
And I had to pretend.
yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, pretend to be something else,
These
someone
are the
else.
these are the masks that we start putting on, right? Because, at a very early age when we're not able to express and we have to behave a particular way in the situation, it's a subconscious that's building with that, and that's so much work to do to then recognize that, hey, I've put on all these layers of, different
Yes.
ways of behavior and thinking, and yes, that's massive,
Yes.
massive.
And it's interesting that you say that the identity, I think that a lot of us carry that regardless, right? And
Correct.
actually upon reflection, sometimes I think to myself, you know, how different my life actually would have been if my mum was here because I would have wanted to please her.
Mhm.
I would have probably gotten married a lot younger because that's probably what she would have wanted to do. And, I probably would have had kids a lot younger, but like there was that sense of freedom that I had when she left. So I was 12 years old when my stepmom left. So I was a lot younger to figure myself out. Like I had the
Mhm.
space for it. And yes, I was lonely, and yes, I was confused, and yes, a lot of that, happened. But as a 12-year-old, my dad was always working. My older siblings were doing their own thing at that time. I
Mhm.
really had the space to sort of grow into my own identity, which, like a lot of people actually start doing maybe in their 30s or 40s. I
Yes. Yeah.
felt like I had that space to do that a lot younger.
Mhm.
And I guess that's again the way of seeing things, right? It's
It
it's like
absolutely is. It absolutely is, Evelyn, because like anyone else would look at it in a complete different light and perspective that, you were left on your own one more time, but you're
yeah,
looking at it in a very different way. And I love that you share that and I totally resonate with that because I know even though I grew up in this very, very Catholic dominated place with those, you know, upbringing, social values, cultural values. And after mom passed away, there was this sense of void. But then again, I was like, okay, now I can make my decisions. Now I don't have to please anybody. Like, there is now it's a whole playground is for me. And for you to realize that in those formative years, when the emotions are high, when the hormones are on high as well, and take the valid, like resourceful decisions would have been another level of challenge.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But 12, your dad and your stepmother had split, and now you had two mothers to grieve. When did you finally really start to hear your voice again, Evelyn?
Yeah, so when she left, it was a tough time for me because I had just sort of stepped into the womanhood of,
Mm,
going into that. And that's the time that I needed her. It was like,
mm,
so even then, I was a lot more confused. It's almost like, again, when I need that someone, they're not there anymore,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I really had to figure that out and start grieving. But what that meant for me was, again, I didn't know how to talk or didn't know how to voice what I was feeling until I was in year 10. So she would have left when I was in year 8, right? So and I remember telling my friends, like when she left, I remember telling my friends again, it was like I had to just get on with it. Like I'll never forget the way that I told my friends. It was like, oh yeah, my dad and my mum have split up, but that's okay. She's not my mum anyway. It was just like a
Mm.
passing comment, but that's okay. I'm okay because she wasn't my mum anyway. And then they looked at me like, and I don't remember the conversations after that, but it was like I just brushed it off.
It's the
It was
guard you were
like,
putting up. Yeah,
yeah, the strong guard of like, oh yeah, don't
yeah.
worry, I'm okay. Everything's okay. So, for those 2 years, I obviously kept that strong fate of like, yep, it didn't really bother me, didn't affect me. Um, I lost contact with her for all these other reasons. So, but when I was in year 10, one of my best friends, who I'm still friends with now, the only one that I'm still friends with since primary school, probably because we did have this experience together. But in year 10, we just wanted to wag English school. We weren't great at English, didn't like, and we decided, okay, how can we get out of this English class? And we realized there was a new counselor that they had just been promoted, student counselor. Go speak to her. So we're like, let's just go speak to her and see what happens. And my friend's like, do you have anything to say? I'm like, yeah, I think I do. And she was like, I think I've got something to say. We walked in, and an hour later, we walked out just bawling our eyes out. Like we had both let out a secret that we had never spoken about. It was the very first time I cried over what had happened to me. And that was like the beginning of going, how free is that? Like, that's when I think I realized that, like, being yourself and sharing the story of yourself, of what's led you to that, is probably the biggest gift that you can give yourself and to other people as well,
Mm.
because it brought us closer. It brought us, like, the vulnerable part of that was that it brought my friend and I closer. Until this day, we are very different. We have different lives, but that brought us so close that we will always be that soul sisters of whatever happens in our life. We'll just have that respect for each other.
Wow, that's like such a good bond. That sounds fantastic. Someone who you can just let out to
Yep.
and just
Yep.
be.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Like it's really cool when you find that someone, and I'm so glad that you found that someone in your life.
Yep. I'm blessed. Yeah, very blessed because and that's the beauty of just, yeah, just letting it out, right? Just being vulnerable. It really, from that moment on, I go back to that even when I'm scared of being vulnerable or I'm scared of sharing too much of myself. I go back to that moment. I'm like, how freeing was that?
It sounds like a really, really a beautiful, wonderful, precious gift.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
And at a point where you really needed it, and that
Yes.
would have played a big role in shaping you in the emotional side of it, right? Because the guard, he's now finally coming down, and you can trust someone to let it out.
Exactly. That is exactly what it was.
Mm.
Very well said. I like that.
well, there is a turning point for sure. There's Jetstar, NAB, promotions, recognition, and then redundancy hit at the same time that motherhood was there reshaping everything. So, what did that crack open in you, Evelyn?
That was the turning point for me. I think that's when I really honed in on my story and what all of that meant. So, and again, because I had been through so much, I always, and I did the soul searching and I did get help and counseling and understanding more about, the story that is and what you can do with that. And so I worked really hard. And again, we all I wanted to please my dad. My obviously didn't have a mum to please, but I still wanted to please my dad. My dad was very much like, get the education, don't struggle like I did. You know, in Australia, I had to just go into cleaning and factory. You're going to get your profession like we did in El Salvador. In El Salvador, they were professionals. My mum and my dad were, and coming to Australia meant that completely had to start from scratch, right? So, you know, he encouraged me to get the education, to get into a really good corporate job so that financially I could support my family, support myself, and be independent. And I learned to be independent anyway because I had to start working at 13 years old to pay bills. So I was this high achiever of having to be that independent woman who just took care of herself because no one else was there to save me. Not even my dad could save me financially, right? He was in debt himself. And so I had to look after myself financially. So I honed in and became this high achiever, the one that would just get promotions all the time, got to six figures, you know, by the time I was 25, I'd say. And then, you know, then by the time I was 30, I was earning really good money, like traveling, loving my life. And then I became a mum. Then I got married and became a mum, right? And so that all changed for me and all the hard work that I was doing. And then I became a mum through COVID, so COVID time. And then my oldest daughter, who's 5 years old now, and she's okay. She's perfectly healthy, but she went through some health issues for the first 2 years of her life. And it was during that time where we were going back to the corporate office. We needed to go back into office, and because I worked for one of the four major banks, they were getting people to go back into the office. I had a major project to launch, and she got really sick and unwell. And there was surgery, there was an emergency surgery. And for the 2 years, I won't bore you with the story, but there was a lot happening for those 2 years that I had to excuse myself from work and go to these hospital appointments. And I just felt so guilty because I wasn't present. I wasn't that high achiever anymore because I was barely in the office, and I wasn't the present mum that I wanted to be during that time. And then that's where I really honed in and talking about signs and all that sort of stuff. We spoke about that earlier, and I saw a rainbow, right? Like she was sick, and I was holding her. I'm just thinking about work, and I'm thinking about all these things. I see a rainbow, and I'm like, okay, hone in on this moment. It's going to be okay. Trust the journey. That rainbow for me is like that trust that journey part when I'm thinking about asking myself what's happening here. And then I was like, okay, this is all part of the story. This is all part of what's going to lead me to the next thing. And so I honed in on that. Then I realized that when I was pregnant with my second, I was 10 weeks old, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, with my work and all that sort of stuff. And I realized there was a lot of different things happening at work, and there was restructures happening. And I thought to myself, I'm going to get made redundant. Like this is going to be a layoff. Like, because I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not there. I'm not being a high achiever. I'm always having to look after my daughter. And then I realized if that was to happen, right, what's the worst thing that can happen? So I started talking to my husband, and I really honed in on my mum's story. So this is a little bit part of like where all of this is happening. Like I highly recommend to hone in on what it's all telling you. And so when I honed in on my story, what this all means, and I realized that I didn't want to repeat the same cycle. So when I asked the questions about my mum more so, I was like, okay, so my mum passed away at this time, but I asked my dad what was happening before then, like what was our life in El Salvador like? And he was like, oh, she was doing it all. She had a corporate job. She had to go back to work when you were 3 months old. I was raised with nannies, and I see those photos, right? Like who's feeding me? A nanny. Who's showering me? Nanny. Because my mum was doing it all. Like so she had that high achiever as well, being that high achiever. So I learned that even though I had her, I didn't really have her, right? So even those 4 years that I had her, she was doing it all. And when I then started talking to my siblings about like, what do you remember of mum? And what did she say about like moving countries and why did she do it? And then I realized that she made that courageous leap to come to Australia, right? And when my sister remembers the reasons why she remembers this conversation that she had with my mum saying, that she wanted to move to Australia because it's going to be bigger land. We're going to live in a farm. We're going to have animals. We're going to have time to plant flowers and get have a garden together. And we're going to be spending more time together. And then, when we landed in Australia, none of that happened because she got straight away diagnosed. But that's what my sister remembers. So for me, I honed into that story, that part of the story. I'm like, okay, so my mum was courageous enough to leave a comfort, her stable job, the house that we had, the nannies, the help, the community, and she left that all to probably look for this slower life, for to look for a more present life. She wanted to spend time with us, and she never got that time. So what does that mean for me? It's like, well, sure, I've built this for 40 years, similar to her, right? She was 40 when she passed away. So I've built this for almost 40 years. And as much as it's hard to give that away, I need to be courageous and take that same leap and think about how can I take the control back and start a business, which is a risky option. Start a business and then now work and still have the ambition on my terms and be able to work around my family and not the other way around. And for me, when I became a mum, I realized the slow mornings were everything. I hated parenting from a place that I was rushing out the door going, Mummy has to be in the office. Mummy has to. My daughter was so young and she was unwell that I had to run into the office. I'm like, I don't want that anymore. So I honed in on that story and I honed in on what I wanted. And I realized I have to make a change. I've got to change things up. And being present for my girls was just a non-negotiable for me.
Wow, that is a humongous realization from what your mother really wanted. And you're like, oh my goodness, being present. You
Yeah.
come to that. It's so simple and it's like, wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
insane. And how does it feel now when you're being present?
Oh, look, it feels amazing. Like, for example, like the other day, it was my 41st birthday. So 41 years old, which means that I I made it past the year of what she was, right? And I didn't realize how that was going to feel for me. It was a Monday, so I had just the normal plans. I was going to work, and the girls were going to daycare, and I wanted to spend Sunday with them. But then I woke up on Monday. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't need to feel guilty anymore. Like, I can make the call. I can take the day off, and the girls don't need to go to daycare and just be present with them. That's what birthdays should be about. And I'm like, I honed in on the feeling of like, this is actually a milestone. Like, I'm
Mm.
41, an age that my mum never got to. And I really got to not have, and I had no one to ask for permission for, right? Like it was just, okay, well, I'm the boss now and I can do whatever. And it's just such a beautiful freedom feeling of having that choice. And although we're running this business, I get to choose what time I start work. I won't have meetings before 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is so that I can have the slow mornings with them and I don't rush them. And I'm able to give them space because they're so young for the morning high emotions. And I give them that space. And for me, parenting from that place makes me feel less guilty for having ambition and having to take them to daycare, but because I still spend the morning with them.
Love that you said that. We were just having this conversation just before because I was feeling like I should take a day off and all this conversation in the brain, should I, shouldn't I? And that's what I was saying that, the affirmation that business is easy.
Yeah.
Because when we have turned this corporate world where we have to be there 9 to 5, and as a business owner, we are even working sometimes in the night or
Yeah.
even on the weekends, and but in between that 9 to 5, you have to take that break. It's like that guilt pops in, and then it's like, no, you don't need to feel that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Life is too precious,
Yeah.
to be feeling that.
Well, you then went in on a healing journey, counseling, nurturing your inner child. So for people in business or women in business who are holding everything together, why does that inner work matter so much, Evelyn?
Oh, that's a very good question. For me, well, for me, it started with like nurturing the inner child because I had no nurturers, to begin with. But I think that it matters either way. I mean, you can look at my story and go, oh, but you had to know. I think that everyone has to nurture their inner child because, again, like what happens to us as children, and again, I learned this from counseling and from healing. What happens to us as children is out of our control. Our parents did the best that they could with the resources they had at that time. And of course, they're human, they're not perfect, they make choices that probably would have affected you as a kid. They probably would have said a lot of things to you. I mean, even being a mum now to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, I can see if you're not conscious and you're not, and I guess for me, parenting in that sense, I see so much now that I'm like, oh, I see why everyone needs to nurture their inner child, because even when I say something to my child that I mean love, they don't always perceive it that way, right? It's the perception that you have as the child that even though your parents are doing it out of love, out of this and respect and all that sort of stuff, us as children don't see that. And I'll give you an example if that's okay. I don't want to take too much space, but
Sure.
this is like the children in us, in all of us, right? My daughter was 22 months when my second daughter was born, so she was still a baby essentially. And I'll never forget this time where I was breastfeeding. She would have been 6 months old, so my second baby would have been 6 months old, and my oldest was turning three, almost turning three, right? And she asked me, Mum, can I have some? Because she kept on obviously seeing that I was feeding my like baby. And so she was still a baby, or she still thought that she was, right? She's like, can I have some? I was like, no, honey, no, and I didn't explain why. But now, literally, maybe 3 weeks ago, she's like, Mum, do you remember she's 5 years old? Mum, do you remember the time that you were feeding Alyssa and I asked you for some and you said no? Why was that? And she asked the reason why, right? So probably as a 3-year-old, she probably thought to herself, my mom doesn't love me enough, right? Why is she feeding, breastfeeding, the youngest, but not me? And it was that comparison, right? Because also children have that comparison with siblings. And when I had the moment to explain to her, I was like, look, honey, that was the reason why I'm glad that you asked me this, because it's really important that you ask these questions. The reason why I couldn't feed you is because you were older. You weren't a baby anymore. You were 3 years old and she would have probably been 6 months. This is for babies, and the milk that was coming out probably would have made you feel sick in your tummy. And she's like, oh, and then I would have been sick all week. I said, yeah, exactly. I want to make you feel sick. And she had this smile, like an affirmation, right? That she was loved. I was doing it because of love. So that's just an example of like our inner child, of things happening to us that were done to us, but we as children perceived it in a different way, and then that becomes our inner voice. Our inner voice is we're not loved enough. Like my siblings loved more. So all that inner things that happened to us while we were kids,
Mm.
it affects the way we show up as adults. Sometimes when we have these times where we don't think we're good enough, and this is so important, especially in business, you are good enough, and you are able to nurture that inner child of yours, because the way that you want to nurture them, you've got that control and you can do that work. Because I think that when it comes to business, there's a lot of people pleasing that we do. There's a lot of hiding behind the work that we do. There's a lot of performing without really understanding. So sometimes in business, we might just say yes to things, but it doesn't really, having or creating boundaries is so important. And then the inner child work that you're doing, creating the boundaries between what you actually want and how you want to show up for yourself, for your business, you need that self-worth. And you need to know that you are deserving of the success. And it's important to talk to yourself with kindness and to nurture and to really just step into that new version of yourself. And in fact, I actually have two photos, and they're very intentional, right? So at my desk, I've got my desk, I'm working on it, and sometimes obviously imposter syndrome will come up, or I'm about to have a conversation I don't want to have, or it's a challenging time. I have two photos up where I can see them. One photo was when I was 11 months old, just starting to walk. And for me, that feeling of knowing that potentially my mum wasn't there for these milestones, right? Because I know that she was busy and I know that I grew up with nannies. And so that's the version of myself that I need to nurture, because even when I had my mum, I didn't have her. And so I know I have to nurture that part of me as an 11-month old. And then there is the other one when I was in grade two. I started a new school because my family, with my stepmom, we all moved to a new house. And that was the moment that I started a new identity. No one knows that my mum has passed away. So this is my new beginning. This is my new identity. And so that is intentional as well because I now need to nurture that part of myself that had to be yeah, belong, I guess, in a place that I didn't belong. Like it wasn't me. And so I have to nurture that child of mine. So does that make sense?
It's beautiful. Absolutely. I was just, I often have these conversations with the clients who feel that, that loss of confidence, self-esteem, and it all comes from the childhood and how you were nurtured and, having that safety net of somebody loving you. And the exercise of really falling back in love with your younger self is such a wonderful gift to give yourself. And I
Absolutely.
love it that you've done that. And I see this, with AI, you can actually hug and have a picture of yourself with and I find that very, very powerful because
Yeah.
just giving the little child that hugs that she very much needed then and feeling them deeply is so wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a known thing now, isn't it? Like it's beautiful to see that we can now understand that as a society that like and again there's no blaming of like what our parents did and all that sort of stuff. It's just it like, we
Fall
live
back
they
in
live
love with
different.
you.
Yeah, that's right.
In love, in love. That's amazing. Well, Evelyn, you spent years suppressing your voice. So hiding, code switching, people pleasing. How does someone like that end up building a business entirely about authentic voice?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Well, a lot of it comes from obviously my own experience of having to be someone else. But, I've noticed and going through business, I mean, starting a business, it wasn't something that I was like born to want to do, right? So for me, it was like a really, I had to step into this complete new identity, right? So even then, stepping into this new identity, I had to find my business entrepreneurship voice. So I went through that identity step of going, this is my life and understanding that, right? The identity shift is like, this was my life of a corporate who had the friends, who were stable, secure, but stepping into this business side of things, I remember feeling the time where I actually had to accept the fact that this was it. And when I commit to something, I commit to something. Like I know I'm all in. I was crying. I cried because I knew that it came with sacrifice. I knew that it came with, choosing your authentic voice, going into and stepping into something means that other people won't get you. Like they may not understand the new version of you. And that's hard too, because you've grown up with these people that you thought were your friends and all that sort of stuff. And you have to explain it to your family that, you have to really be confident enough to fight all of the people that try to keep you safe, right? Because they've been taught to keep safe. And so when I was going into this identity shift and then realizing how hard that was and finding my authentic voice as a business owner and as like someone who wants a lot more out of my life than what I thought I did, it was taking people with me. So community is a big thing for me. And I realized that I needed my community and I didn't have that. And as I was younger, not having my community and learning to build my own, I took that with me in business and decided to take my own control back. I don't know anyone in business. I don't know anyone who's done this before. So I'm going to create one. So I created a podcast called Legacy Building Mamas Podcast. I created my community. I had people reach out to me about, just taking that vulnerable step and, comes from, going from not sharing my story to going, I need to share my story. I need to share more about this and take people on the journey with me. And so as I'm starting to build the community, I started to hear a lot of people, and connection is important, having conversations that had the same struggles in business, the same struggles in identity, the same, and I was like, how can I help these people? How can I help these people find authentic voice? And so I started coaching on the side. So I was building a business with my husband, and here I am just trying to help people build that authentic voice, their authentic positioning in their business, and sharing their stories and tell me more about that story. Okay, well, how, and all of a sudden I started to feel this sense of also purpose and impact and freedom of like helping others build theirs. And I created something called the Speak Framework. I started to run workshops, and it just sort of came from community, from really listening in to what people needed and what people struggled with. My husband as well struggled with the same thing. Brilliant people are hiding behind their work. My husband's one of them who's brilliant at what he does, and I'd see him build businesses even before we met. And I used to tell him people need to know more about you, and hence the reason why I started the podcast so that I could talk about what he's doing, behind the scenes. And I just fell in love with this kind of start of the side of the business, which brought in leads, and people were reaching out to him going, I see your wife everywhere. She's on a podcast. Made me think of you. Let's talk about this. And he'd get like people reach out to him, even though it wasn't him talking about it, but I was talking about him. And so I realized the power of that, like,
Mm.
the power of social media, the power of connecting with people outside of your comfort zone. And I want that for more people. And I want that to be accessible to more people.
Wow, that's huge. And listening to people, having a community that you've built around it, and it gives me like warm and fuzzy feelings, like someone is there for me, and you're there for all of these people. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Building a community from scratch.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's been the best thing that I've done because the reason why I'm still here is because of them. Because when things get hard, it was as much as I was helping them that they were helping me.
Mm.
Sometimes it was just that one person that would tell me how much I said something or meant to them that would remind me why I do what I do. And they helped me show up. And I can guarantee the reason why I'm still here 3 years after starting my business is because I had those people as cheerleaders. I was cheering them on as much as they were cheering me on. And that's real community.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that feeling, and it's that energy exchange. It's everything that we do within that circle, right? We say this thing at Biz Growth Network that you are who you surround yourself with, and this
Yeah.
is the power of people. So we're constantly giving that energy and moving forward, and I'm so glad we're doing that here in this space in the podcast as well. And that's the whole purpose. How can we listen to these beautiful stories, get inspired, but also take those action steps, no matter how tiny they are. If that means working on your mindset, working on the one negative thing that's there in your life right now, then so be it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so Evelyn, moving to Speak Studio, what is it? Who is it for? And why does it matter right now in a world which is flooded with so much information and AI content?
Yeah, really good question. So the Speak framework, as I mentioned before, came about from coaching, from doing workshops, and it's all about building your personal brand with connection. And Speak stands for sharing your story. Um, and ideally we're sharing your story that also matters to your ideal client, so really understanding who your ideal client is in business and how to share that story and put that into one that actually resonates with your ideal client is really important to take note, right? Because anyone can share a story, but it's the how do you put that into context for your ideal client that they resonate with you, and all of a sudden they want to connect with you and say, hey, I want to know more about you. And then presenting with purpose is like reframing the sales part of what we all struggle with selling. And, it's actually not, it's not selling to them, but it's solving for them. So what are you solving for, right? And that comes with presenting it with purpose. Why you, why now, why this? And that becomes a transformation. So how do you then provide that to others that need that transformation? Because if you don't put yourself out there, then you can't help them and you can't present that with purpose, and therefore, your hidden talent then goes invisible, right? Like, you're not doing, and again, I sort of reframe it as it's a disservice for you not to sell, and so again, you're not selling, you're actually being of service, right? And then E is educate. So how do you educate your audience? How do you provide value so that they trust you, so that they know that you are that person that they can come to and as a guide, right? And then authorities, how do you actually prove that you have the credibility for that? And how do you share the customer testimonials in a way, again, that's kind of storytelling as well. And then K is keep your brand consistent. So keep your voice consistent, essentially. Like, who are you? What do you stand for? What do you care for? People also buy opinions. People also buy values. So being, true to your values as well. And how does that come out when it comes to talking to or putting yourself out online? So that was the framework that really resonated, that I created based on my own experience as I was stepping into the online world. And then also how that helped my husband as well with also, getting outside of just being behind his work. And then with that, then I actually was invited to do a workshop in Oklahoma. And I was going all the way to Oklahoma in the US. And I kept asking myself, this is all great, right? People get it. People understand how to, write and do the workbooks, but it's the implementation part. So a lot of people were asking me, how do you implement it? And in terms of process and systems, it got really convoluted, right? And in Sales Command, with like the business with my husband, I was learning a lot about AI, and we were all about using AI but being authentic. Right? Authentic messaging is so important. And we use the Speak framework for our clients. And we did a lot of email marketing messages through the Speak framework. And I realized that that was getting in leads. So it was working for Sales Command. And I was like, how can I make that more accessible? Again, it was accessibility for more people. I want this to be accessible for people so they are able to share more of them and be seen and be heard. So I created an app. 6 weeks before I went to Oklahoma, I'm like, I'm just going to build an MVP and then run the workshop and then offer an implementation system that they can just get into and buy a lifetime access of this app. And out of 30 women that were there, 10 bought it straight away. They were like, yep, I need this. And then so obviously I realized that there's a need for it. And so when I came back home, I reiterated it. I've been working on it. And now I've got almost 40 people using the app in 2 months.
Wow. Well, you're helping other people build visibility, build the authority, and really come out there being authentic. And you launched in Oklahoma. You
Yes.
now have 40 people on the app and investors looking at it. What has this chapter cost you, and what has it given you?
Wow, very, very good question. And to be completely honest, it's cost me financially, it has been the hardest year because when you're working on something like this, you're not getting the financial gains like, having a business like Sales Command, we charge retainers and all that sort of stuff. And then building this on the side means that it's costing me time and being able to scale Sales Command because I'm no longer doing that. And my husband's running that by himself, but now also wants like this app, we think that there's a lot. It could be as small as we want it to be or as big as we want it to be. And this is when you're building something that is like not that instant gratification. I'm not getting that instant gratification financially, right? But you can see the long-term gains that it has. The right now, financially, it's hard. It's costing us money and time, right? But when we're looking at the future, and that's the reason why I thought I'd reach out to an investor to go, hey, does this have legs, right? Or does it not?
Mhm.
And he said the same thing. This can be as small as you want it to be or as big as you want it to be. And when you're talking about that, then there's obviously you got to go backwards to go forwards. And and it's that decision that you have to sort of back yourself, right? And another cost for me is really becoming a new version of myself. Because if this thing actually becomes big, what is that going to take of me? and
Mm.
the sacrifices that that's going to have on me, and being ready for that version of myself, stepping into a level where I'm like, I'm going to build software. Like, I've never wanted to build, again, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I never wanted to get into software. But the love that I have for the people that need this, and the love that I have for like the experience that I've been through, the story, it's like I can no longer unsee it, if that makes sense.
Mm. Mm.
It's like such a huge thing and such a big vision, and then you got to stay put because persistence and being consistent is what's going to get you there. So really holding on to it, that's massive. What would you say to women in business who are doing everything right, but they feel like they're playing a game that was not designed for them?
Whether you're in business or whether you're, working 9 to 5, either way, I feel like us as women, it feels like nothing of this was built for us, right? Whether you're working the 9 to 5, climbing the corporate ladder, and what I would say is that you don't have to follow that path, right? Like, we got sold this success, that we could do it all. Like, I think that like women being told we can do it all. We've been sold that success. But I guess what's really important is probably just honing in on what is your happiness? What are you fighting for? Like, what does that success mean to you? And redefining what that means to you. What that means to me might be different to you. So I can't tell you, hey, follow this path, but really hone in on, what does your future self look like? What do you look like? Where do you want to be? And I started off by just even writing, what do my days look like? Even just knowing that I wanted to start work at 10 o'clock or 11, then 9 to 5 just doesn't work for me. And building a business that supports that.
Mm.
And Adam and I have built 3 businesses, right? To really hone in on what's really important. So we've tried this. Okay, well, that's really taking a lot out of us. That's not really scaling the way that we want it. So we'll try this. So pivoting, just knowing that you have that flexibility to also just create what works for you and for your family. It's possible, but you need to, surround yourself with people that have done that before. You need to surround yourself with people that will inspire you to get to that level. And you need to surround yourself with knowing that self-development. And you may say, for example, with me, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not creative, I'm not a tech person, I'm not. If you keep telling yourself these things, then you're never going to be that. But when you see possibility, and this is where I sort of started to open my eyes up, is where I saw possibility in, building my community, in talking to women that had done that before. I realized that if it's possible for her, then it's possible for me. And
Mm.
then leaning into that, and then going, what do I need to do to become this person? Then educate yourself, or learn the skills. I learned AI skills. I learned to be tech, I learned to be creative, and I learned all of that. It's and even putting yourself out there online, like, confidence doesn't come first. It's like these small actions that you put into place,
Mm.
that's what makes you confident.
That is so massive, Evelyn. Well, you literally arrived like so many golden nuggets just from this conversation. You arrived at the country, you had to grieve. There's no roadmap, no explanation, no time to really, fall apart. And you built a God. There was this false identity, a life that looked perfect on the outside. And it took going all the way back to that little Evelyn, to that little girl, to finally come all the way forward. And I love how you said that you can't control what happens to you, but you can absolutely control how you react to it. So get help, like how you did from the counselor, tell the story, let it out, be vulnerable, because sharing your truth is not really weakness. That's the biggest gift that you can give yourself. And on that journey, you might, come in contact with a friend who then you can become besties with, and you're someone who really went backwards so then you can go forwards. And look where forwards has taken you. Your mom took a courageous leap to give you a better life. And this right here is what she leapt for.
Yeah.
So, right now, Evelyn, who are you becoming?
I am becoming this AI architect that builds a software that is going to be, if you think about Canva, that big in terms of personal brand. So being the person behind that vision, that mission behind it, helping others show up online to be visible, to be heard, and to be seen is who I'm becoming.
Wow, that is a big, big vision. And we wish you all of the best because we know that you're one hell of a woman and there's a community backing and we're with you in this, Evelyn. And what is the belief that you are choosing to carry into this next chapter?
My belief is that I can create the next Canva for personal branding, that this Speak Studio app will be that big. That's
Wow.
my
Love
belief.
it. Love it.
Sending all those
Amen.
Thank
energies
you.
to you, all the
Thank you so
positivity,
much.
great energies. Well, that 4-year-old in the hostel, she was lost, unsure in a new country. If she could see you now on international stages, building tech, helping people finding their voice, what would she say?
She would say, you became the woman that I needed. That, this was what she needed. She needed that role model. She needed that belief that, it is possible to be that. And that little girl, I felt like she needed someone to fight for her. I feel that that girl needed to be heard, um, to like let her mum's let her grieve for everything that she lost, and to not have that community around her. But now she sees me. It's like you became that. Like you found that, and that was the person that she needed, and I was always there, if that makes sense. Like I was always there, and I did it. I did fight for that little girl.
Yeah, we're so glad you did. And you fought for that little girl. And we have you here, and we have the privilege of having this conversation with you.
Thank
Evan,
you.
what do you want migrant children, every person who grew up between that two worlds, to take from your story?
Embrace both worlds and see it as a blessing. And again, it's a reframe of how we see things. I can definitely understand that, children want to fit in. But let's reframe that and say, let's embrace the both worlds that you have. It's a blessing. It's not a complication. For me, it was like, having my community from El Salvador meant that I learnt what community actually was like belonging to a community, because my culture is all about that family and like living together, and going back to El Salvador brought that to me. And then from Australia, like leveraging the opportunities that we have that other countries don't have, right? So even belonging to this world where we're so lucky to live in a country that opens the doors for us, take that as well as a massive opportunity. So, talk to both communities, talk to your, your born community, where you were born, where you've migrated from. Like, talk to that, be part of that community, embrace yourself in these communities. Because again, we live in a beautiful country, Australia. If you are listening, and you are from Australia, in Australia, we have communities of different, I've got my Salvadorian community that I can go to and leverage of. And you have two viewpoints, you have two networks. And yeah, just surround with people who've been there on both sides of your story.
Absolutely. Well, people are power, and I'm so glad we're able to do that, bringing the yin and the yang. And we're so grateful for Australia and all the opportunities that we have here on a daily basis. What is the one thing, Evelyn, you want every woman listening to do differently from tomorrow? What's the action step that they can take?
I love that. I would say, and if you haven't heard me say it before during this conversation, pay attention to your story, own it and tell it. Because when you hone in onto your story, because everyone has one, right? Like everyone has a story. You might think, oh my gosh, can't beat that story, can't beat, like it's not about even comparing whose stories. You have a story, you have the power within you to really hone in on that. And I really hope that, something that I have said maybe even reminded you of your own story. And if you're unsure, hone in on that. Ask others, ask your family members. Again, ask your, whoever you can, uncle, auntie, if you've got your parents, ask them all. Be curious about what that all means to you. Find out more about your childhood, and because that's where it's at. I think that once you own it and you start to tell it, then it leads you to where you're meant to go.
Own it and hone it. I love that. And definitely be curious. Your stories resonated with both Audrey and myself. And for everyone watching, definitely follow this beautiful woman and her journey. Evelyn, how can the viewers connect with you? Where would be the best way?
I am usually on Instagram, so Evelyn Lopez Dillon, and I'll send you the link for the Instagram and also LinkedIn. So I spend a lot of time on those two platforms.
Love it. So we will be putting it down here for everyone watching on YouTube and everywhere else as well. If something in this conversation resonated with you, ask yourself the same question. Who are you becoming? Because your voice is not just how you speak, it's how you show up in your business, in your life, in the room. And when you own your story, you take back everything. This is Life in Biz Unfiltered. Thank you, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.